Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Coherence. This is a sturdier sci-fi genre pick than we're really used to anymore, and it feels almost like a really good 50s science fiction film or a Twilight Zone episode. It feels so universal and feels so creepy and blows your mind at the same time, but gets you so invested in it and interested. It's exactly what you want of any really good sci-fi genre film. Coherence is the kind of good, sturdy genre film I think that's the science fiction genre was really based on and really started out before it became the stuff of major blockbuster motion pictures. And Coherence exemplifies that so well. I think with all its complications and everything, you could go on various theories about it, but at the same time it's very clear. There's never a time I felt like while I was watching it that even the most mainstream audience member or the most passive viewer would be like, what's going on? It's kind of similar, you could say, to Primer, but I think unlike Primer, you could really tell what's going on and it can be clear while still having all those theories and being a very well-built both concept-wise and with its characters, and it almost feels like both are just as important. A casual dinner party among a lot of friends, and they're hanging out and everything's fine. And there's some little bit of drama and you learn a bit about each character. Not every character exactly, but you learn about the central characters. Then they're talking about a comet that's going overhead, and then after the comet starts going overhead, all the power goes out, some of their cell phones, just the glass in their iPhones just break all of a sudden, and then the lights go out. They want to go to this other house in the neighborhood whose lights are on, and when they leave, two of the men leave and come back with a box, and they start to realize that basically that when the comet is overhead, they're able to go into different realities of the same situation. Basically, they compare it to the film Sliding Doors, but it's a whole theory where if you make one decision, automatically there is a different reality where you've made another decision, and then those realities keep multiplying. They start to encounter themselves from these different realities and try to make sure they're in the right reality and to make sure they're safe before the comet goes over again and they can't go into these other realities. Not that I just blew the film, and I don't even think I explained it well because it's such a high concept, but this film kind of lays its cards out really quickly. It doesn't like to hide anything. Telling someone the concept isn't ruining it. I knew the concept before I saw it, and that was the reason I wanted to see it, really. It's what makes it an interesting, tight science fiction genre film. When I say genre, I guess it's really like people stuck in their house during a big event. The original Night of the Living Dead would be a great example. Science fiction is really based on those things where you can't have a ton of special effects and you didn't have the money. And back before Star Wars, before there's big blockbusters, science fiction films didn't have a lot of money, so they'd have to resort to things like this. Coherence actually kind of had the same situation. The director, James Burkett, wanted to make a small film and he wanted to make it in his house, mostly in his living room, but he didn't want to spend a ton of money. So what he did was he came up with a concept that would make the film bigger than just his living room and his house, and boy did he succeed in that one. And apparently most of the film is improvised, and it doesn't have an improvisational feel to it. I actually didn't know that before I saw the film, and I thought it was very tightly kind of scripted, the way they edit it and shoot it and everything. I guess now maybe I'd be able to tell more because I know that. Maybe I'd be looking at things. I'm assuming maybe he gave them like, okay, in this scene this needs to be accomplished or this information needs to get passed. And sometimes when they have to get certain information that kind of help the concept and clear up the concept and make sure you as the audience knows what's going on, it does feel a little like exposition time. I don't mind it because it's so genre, like kind of genre's good spooky, scary science fiction story. It actually kind of works for it. It's interesting how well and tight this movie is for an improv film. You don't think of that when you think of film that's with a lot of improvisation. And it says a lot about the editing and the direction. Apparently they shot this in 5 days, which is just mind-blowing because it's so well put together. I rarely see science fiction films this tight. I like films like Primer, I like complicated science fiction, but I like how this is really a very complicated idea. In it, they do talk about the film like Sliding Doors, and there's a theory about a cat in a box, which I'm not going to explain well, how you put a cat in a box with poison, and before you open the box, there's two realities that exist, the one where the cat's dead and the one where the cat is not dead. I don't like this so much because it involves the dead cat, but whatever. That there's some theories that when you open the box, those realities merge, and then the one that is the real one goes on and the other one cease to exist. But there's others that other reality keeps going. And I like when they bring up things like sliding doors and have different theories. Some people, I've read a bunch of reviews, and a lot of people say that's the problem with it, because they're these Generation Xers and they sound like they're talking about theories, like they're talking about Lost or something. But I feel like that's kind of the way people talk now, whether it's theories about True Detective or theories about TV shows or politics or whatever. That feels a lot more common to me, has a natural sense to it. At the beginning of the film, before any of this happens, since they're at this dinner party, they really feel like I'm at a real dinner party. Like, I kind of was thinking about dinner parties I was at. I felt really kind of calm and at ease, so that when the crazy shit goes down, you care about these characters, you have a connection, you understand who each of them are. And I really got that in Coherence, more than I have from a lot of films. Now, naturally, I guess the problem with this whole setup, and I was thinking about this when I was watching it, is that you can't introduce every single character. You can't have some characters are better developed than others. Some you're like, what is exactly his deal? What's his job? I don't understand. But you have enough that it definitely works. You don't really need all that. After you get further in the film, you're not really thinking about like, so what's exactly this guy's deal with this? It's just not interesting. And it's not important. The girl who's on the poster, Emily Baldani, who plays Emily, she's probably kind of the central character. Emily, you kind of have the most backstory for. Her arc is built very, very well. You can understand how it comes from improv, because clearly if you're going to have a lot of actors improv, they're going to do a lot on their characters. It does say written by James Burkett everywhere I looked at this. It's apparently story by James Burkett and Alex Monaghan, who plays Amir in this film. He's not that central, but he is in it. Emily's kind of the driving force behind it. Emily Baldani is kind of playing the kind of thankless lead role in it, but she's really good at it because you really follow her. You follow her fears in a good kind of tightly wound kind of mystery science fiction story does. And you definitely right away get what she's going through. There's a lot of thanklessness in doing a lead role like that. It's not as showy. You have other actors like Nicholas Brendan, who I haven't seen since Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I was thinking the other day, how come he's not in more stuff? He plays Mike, and actually in the film, he tells everyone at the dinner party he was the lead in Roswell, which is an interesting turn of events. I read in one review, someone brought this up, and it's an interesting kind of theory that maybe he's playing an alternate universe of himself because he's in Roswell and not Buffy. Like, is that choice to mean that? I don't think it is, but it's funny. He claims he was a lead on that show. He doesn't say what his part is, and I've noticed a lot of people comment that he's playing a lead that never existed. Well, maybe in this universe it's the same show, but he's the lead, but one of the people at the table doesn't recognize him, which is kind of funny when I think about it now, that like you don't really look like him. I actually liked all the actors. I've seen a lot of beer, smaller budget sci-fi, and a lot of times, you know, people can get really stuck in their kind of various roles or the tropes they're playing, and these actors don't seem to do that. They seem to want to do more with it and really explore that. Now that I'm thinking about it and talking about it, I can understand more how this film was improv. If you had this film written, maybe it wouldn't work as well. Just a tightly made science fiction film, and a clearly tightly made science fiction film. And I like complicated sci-fi, I like big blockbuster sci-fi, but I think this kind of a science fiction film I don't see very much anymore, and it shows what you can really invent on a big budget, because this is a science fiction film with no special effects budget. Like, the comet's pretty simply done. It never feels cheap because of the low budgetness of it. It feels interesting, and it feels like I want to see more. I actually would see this film again. I would recommend it to fans of science fiction and horror, like hardcore fans, but I'd also recommend it to people who aren't necessarily in that. It's something that like makes you sit up in your seat and pay attention. They set up the characters well. I think it's a very well structured, well built film, and for how quickly they shot it and how they made it makes it even more impressive. The Coherence is a real gem of a movie, and it was shot on a low budget, and you can kind of tell, but how well it was directed you almost can't. And I think James Burkett's a director who I'm really going to watch out for, and he's actually worked in Hollywood for a while. He's a writer. He helped write Rango. He's worked in the art department. I haven't seen a science fiction film that's so into its concept and into its characters. We do live in a very concept heavy time right now, but this is a concept that kind of is really invested in the moral implications and what it would do for these characters. That makes sense, that you're like, oh, the character at the beginning of the film is at the end, and it made me think about the ending and go, maybe That's it. What was going on here? It's mysterious, but it's clear. Oddly enough, that this is a smaller release because it's like really what good mainstream filmmaking should be, where you can do all this interesting, odd stuff, but still be clear for everyone in the audience. Talking about an idea of these characters being able to go into different realities of themselves, just because the characters say something works that way doesn't mean it exactly works that way. I took for granted as I was watching it that they completely understood it, but just because they understand it that way doesn't mean it is that way. And I think the film kind of takes that on. So if you think there's a plot hole in it, there really isn't, maybe, because who knows how this works. This is a great science fiction film, and I think it's probably one of the better science fiction films that'll come out of this year. If you're into sci-fi, this is probably the film you must see this summer. It's just a film that really embodies what science fiction used to be and the possibility of science fiction, which was really based on story and not spectacle. This reminds me of the well-told storytelling of people like Rod Serling and low-budget filmmaking of sci-fi that they used to have to do to get a science fiction film made, and it embodies it very well and tells the story clearly, and is just a great, fantastical story science fiction film done on a low budget. And Coherence keeps you wondering in a way that only a good science fiction story can. So if you have seen Coherence and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.